You're listening to Big World Network.
Billie vs. the Unseen. Episode 1. Written and read by Lucy Bell. The back office of Tea and Crumpets lay in a permanent state of disarray. There was hardly enough room for the plush burgundy armchairs that dominated the matchbox space, not to mention the oak writing desk, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lining every wall, and the large, snoring Rottweiler named Gustave. They crowded the room like boxes of memorabilia, fixed in time and space, as much a part of the room as the very walls that surrounded them. The room was lit by a single desk lamp. Everything was cast in dramatic shadow, including the dry, half-lidded eyes that stared down at me from over square glasses, making me feel like a 5-year-old had broken the good china. "From the beginning, please," Gideon said, his words as crisp as autumn air. I rolled my eyes. I'd already been over the important part. I didn't see any use in starting over. Gideon could be such a stickler. "I already told you," I huffed. "I was chasing a pixie through the dilapidated industrial park. I have that. I want you to start over from the beginning," he insisted, his thumb and forefinger massaging his eyes, his glasses pushed up against his forehead. "The beginning, huh?" I could go as far back as when Gideon and I met, when he first slid into the booth across from mine and proposed a world full of the impossible, the unbelievable. From the dead-eyed, blank-faced expression Gideon shot me, it was clear he meant no, not that far back. Had either of us been less tired, I would have stated from the real beginning anyway, just to irritate him. Gideon looked like he'd rolled out of bed not 5 minutes before, with his usually tamed short curls a bird's nest atop his head. A single button on his shirt remained open, scandalous on a man who pressed his shirts at the seams, buttoned them to the neck, and wore cufflinks. His cuffs now flew out around his wrists, completing his disheveled appearance. Not as if I was any better. I couldn't tell, as I'd yet to pass a mirror, but judging by how I felt, I must have looked like a train wreck, horrifying in a way that you had to stare. Gideon tapped the end of his fountain pen against his office table, an antique piece of furniture intricately carved with lion claw legs and Celtic knots along the sideboards. The contents atop were sectioned and organized, with pens and pencils in a coffee cup, paper clips in a bowl, and stacks of folders lined up against the side, a contrast to the otherwise chaotic room. I sucked in a deep breath and puffed out my cheeks. I was on the 25 bus. Gideon resumed scrawling on the sheet of paper that made my report, the fountain pen scratching with every stroke. Going where? Downtown. Where else? Gideon's only reaction was a subtle twitch in his clenched jaw. I was going to a girls' night at Fee's place. Had a bag of chips and dip in one hand, a bottle of wine in the other. They're probably still sitting on the bus, I added wistfully, though I doubted the bags had actually made it to the next stop. I'd left them there without second thought. Without first thought. "That's when I saw him," I continued, the scene blooming fresh in my mind. I could even remember my thoughts. A girls' night. God, did that sound good. A reprieve from work and school. Some time for my friends and I to watch chick flicks and talk about our lives. Not that I had much to talk about. No, that's not right. I had a great deal to talk about, if only I could. Then I saw the blighter, shining as bright as an LED flashlight. He hovered in plain view of the bus stop. At first I thought it was a reflection of the lamps across the street, though when it glowed and flickered an eerie blue, I knew it couldn't be man-made. Perhaps it was a will-o-wisp. Then the other heads on the bus turned. They all looked right at the creature, and the light didn't even blink. I knew there was trouble. He was glowing like a neon sign. Unknowing couldn't help but see him. Hell, I saw him, without sleep of the dog or a keystone, I explained. In my reenactment, I'd managed to lose control over my gestures, spilling the mug full of pencils across Gideon's desk. After half-heartedly fumbling them back into their container, I relaxed into my seat and resumed nursing my warm cup of tea. The plastered cut on my hand stung where it made contact with the mug, a reminder of how close I'd been. I could see the vibrating wings of the fairy, its pinched little face twisted in a pained grin. "Which stop?" Gideon asked. I glanced up from the dregs of the tea. I wasn't much for divination, but the clumped leaves took an odd, ominous shape. Which bus stop? Gideon sighed. "The one under the loop, on Macon Highway, across from those failed ritzy apartments. You know where the industrial park is." Gideon's grip on his pen slackened so that the cap rested against the paper he'd been scribbling on. His whole body tensed, then unwound, his eyes closed. When he did stare at me, his gaze said, "You couldn't try to be this difficult. So you chased it." I didn't chase it. I pursued it with the unrelenting determination of a lioness and her prey. I hunted the flighty devil through a maze of crumbling brick walls, 6 feet sinkholes, and invasive bramble that was intent on tripping even the most steady-legged runner. It was one of those vines, the long climbing vines of kudzu with their snaking tendrils and death grip on whatever they hooked their roots into, that wound round my ankle and tossed me into what remained of a support beam. The plum bruise on my knee smarted with the memory. "Billy?" Gideon cut through my musing, his gray-eyed gaze intensifying. I couldn't quite meet his stare. "Yes, I gave the devil a good run for it. Through an abandoned industrial park, minutes from any road, with not an artificial light in sight." I was too busy rolling my eyes to notice the tense way he ground out his words. Sometimes it felt like Gideon had little faith in my capabilities. Times like these, when he made me feel like a hapless child. I wanted to beat my hands to my chest and proclaim my strength. I had a cell phone. A cell phone that had rung 12 times during the chase. Not that I could have picked it up. I'm not nearly that coordinated. Look, it's not like I couldn't handle myself. Gideon slammed his palm into the desk, causing pens to scatter and stacks of paper to flutter to the ground. "It could have been a trap! An ambush! What were you thinking?" I dropped the tea saucer with a clatter. "I was thinking of pulling the pixie's wings till it told me what the blazes it was doing so far from home. Look! It broke the rules, not me!" I rose slightly from the seat, though my legs remained bowed under the table. Gideon slumped backwards, deflating. What if something worse had happened, Billy? You should have reported the sighting. Let the court deal with the pixie, not to go off running into the dark woods. His tone softened, and he rubbed his forehead as if to ease out the tension. On one hand, he was right. The industrial park lay a good 5 minutes from any main road, buried deep in the dense kudzu forest. There wasn't an artificial light for miles. The park might have been a thriving business once, but now it was merely a whisper of the past. All that remained of it were a handful of support beams, crumbling walls, and an empty, shattered-windowed warehouse. Had there been an ambush, I would have been helpless. On the other hand, there hadn't been an ambush, because no one ambushes a guardian. It's not like we wear special uniforms or name tags or flashy badges. There's no ethereal signature that points to our direction, warning all the unseen of our existence, unless we specifically yell, "Yo, you! With the glamour! I'm a guardian! I'm gonna apprehend you!" No one knows who we are. Not the human unknowing, not the unseen, not even other guardians. I mean, there is a registry, but only the most retentive of handlers even glaze over it. Handlers like Gideon. In a past life, I'm certain it was a mystic, or possibly a large tome in the back end of some elaborate university library. "Think next time," Gideon chastised. Just because I knew he was right, and I didn't mean I had to like Gideon's tone. I've been a guardian for the past 3 years, during which I managed to scrape by with all my bones intact, and most of my years left before me. Sure, ambushes were highly improbable, but it didn't mean the job was easy. It was a dangerous job, one that put me in the path of those far more powerful and magical than me. "Don't baby me," I snapped. "I can take care of myself." Gideon let out a frustrated growl, but didn't say another word. He was staring intently on the far wall, boring a hole into a portrait. Something was on his mind, something important. His gaze was ignitable, which was enough to cool my rising frustration. When Gideon met my eyes, he grimaced. "You're on probation," he stated, his voice just above a whisper. I lurched in my seat, knocking my knee into the underside of the desk. Wincing, I slumped back into the armchair cushion, stupefied. Thoughts raced indiscriminately across my mind, each as indecipherable as the next. Probation? What in the world could I have done to warrant probation? When I managed to rummage up a breath, I said, "What? Why?" I was honestly surprised. Sure, I bent the rules from time to time, but they're a bit like aluminum. Malleable. Why? Because of the incident? Gideon sighed, yet again rubbing his eyes. The dark circles were nearly a permanent fixture there, and I suspected I saw crow's feet forming at the corners. "Oh," was all I could say in response. All my emotions fizzled to the sound of rounded lips. Of course they were upset about the incident. It had warranted proper noun capitalization, after all.
Music by Kevin MacLeod.
You're listening to Big World Network.